Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to go over another beginner tip video, and this one's going to be covering attributes in MLB the Show's Diamond Dynasty. So a lot of confusion happens because it's not really mentioned in the game anywhere, and a lot of the attributes are really vague when you actually look at each card. So I'm going to break down every single attribute and tell you exactly what it does, so that way you can identify, some cards that you want to try out, some that you might think you maybe pass on, or maybe this will explain why you're struggling with some cards more than others because you just weren't aware of how their attributes work. Again, guys, if you do enjoy the MLB content, make sure you subscribe for daily MLB videos. All right, let's get into the video. All right, guys, so we will just work from left to right here, starting with contact. All right, so the higher contact attribute you have against righties and lefties, obviously that's self-explanatory. It's going to be more or less depending on, again, for Mike Trout, obviously against righties with 98, it's going to be more impactful than an 85. So what contact does is it makes the innermost PCI larger. So you've got a little bit more room when trying to square up a pitch. So someone who has really high contact, you don't really have to hit the ball on the screws to really get a good shot out of it. So obviously super advantageous. And again, this is going to help make the innermost PCI larger. All right, then moving on to power. This is pretty simple. It's just how hard you hit the ball. So the higher the power rating, the harder you're going to smash a ball. So when you combine someone that's got really good contact and really high power, that's obviously the best of both worlds. So you don't really have to square up the ball, and you're still going to drill it if you have really high power. That is why it's super important stat, especially early on, because there isn't a ton of amazing pitchers, and if people miss their spots, you can absolutely hammer them if you have really high power ratings, and it makes every card a lot more dangerous because you have a chance to knock one out of the park every single time. Someone with lower power doesn't necessarily mean that you can't hit a home run. It just means that it's not going to have the same oomph when if you don't drill it right on the stitches there. On to vision. So vision makes the outer PCI bigger. So this is really just going to help you out when trying to foul balls off. If you've got really low vision stat and you aren't really close to the ball, like if it's say it's way up in the zone and if you swing at the middle of the plate, like the middle of the zone, you're going to miss it if you have low vision. But if you have a lot higher vision, it's going to make that outer PCI really big, and you're going to have a much higher chance to actually foul the ball off. So obviously it's extremely important, especially for beginner players, to have a really high vision stat. On to discipline. So discipline helps you check swings. So when you double tap, X or circle or whatever, you don't hold it, you'll actually, pull it back. Now, in MLB 21, it's awfully hard to check your swing. In 20, it was almost overpowered. You could basically check your swing extremely easily, and it got away with a lot of, just horrible gameplay because everyone could just check their swing if it's out of the zone. In 21, it's much more difficult. So again, it's not really going to come in too often for beginner players, but that's what the discipline stat does. The clutch attribute. The clutch attribute will make the PCI larger in what's deemed clutch situations. So if you have a guy in scoring position, or if you're down late in a game, the higher the clutch attribute, the higher the PCI will improve. And again, obviously that just helps you out when it matters most. All right, so the bunt attribute, there's two here. There's the drag bunt and the actual bunt. Bunting, the bunt stat, it's when you hold down the bunt button and you basically pre-pitch your before it gets in there, and then you're aiming it. Okay, a drag bunt is if you tap triangle or Y to bunt as you were swinging. So let's say you don't want to show that you're bunting and you want to do it real late. If you have a really high drag bunt stat, you can just tap it instead of an actual hit, and that's how you do a drag bunt. Durability has no impact in Diamond Dynasty, so you can ignore that. That's purely for Road to the Show and franchise. And then moving on to fielding. So the fielding attribute is how likely a player is going to get to the ball. So if you have a higher fielding stat, you'll get a better animation when you're trying to actually field the ball, those really insane bounces, ground balls at shortstop, those kind of things. Third base, first, if you're making diving plays, if you have a really high fielding stat, you'll get a lot more of those animations to make great plays. Arm strength is how far and how hard your player can throw the ball. So obviously this is much more important for outfielders, as if you have a really good center fielder, you can drill someone out at home or in the right or left if someone's trying to tag up. And third and short, obviously more important important. First base and second, it really doesn't matter at all. It's not something you need to pay attention to because obviously that's a much weaker throw that you need. Accuracy, pretty self-explanatory. That's first of all, it's how large the actual, when you're using button accuracy, how large that green area is. So the better, better accuracy on a player, the easier it is to use the button accuracy to actually throw it. If you're using just button throwing, I believe it's just, makes it a lot more effective. That's all. The reaction stat is how quickly fielding animations begin after the ball is hit. So if you see someone when a ball is hit and it takes a half second for them to move, it's probably because they have a low reaction. Anyone that has a great reaction, you could basically just get running immediately as a ball is hit. So obviously that's pretty important again for outfielders specifically, just because they've usually got the longer run and higher reaction time or higher reaction stat will significantly help you out there. Speed, again, pretty self-explanatory. That's just how fast you are. That includes on the base pass as well as when you're fielding. So again, fielders are, you want to have, especially in center field, you want to have a fast center fielder. But all fielders, it's kind of important for, to have some speed there. But it is also going to impact them on the base pass. Now, the stealing attribute, that's a little bit different. That's how good of a jump that player is going to get when you go to steal a bag. So if you have a really low steal attribute and you go to steal it, he'll get a really bad jump. And, regardless of how fast he is, it can really impact your ability to actually steal a base. And then the base running aggressiveness, that's really not going to impact you at all in Diamond Dynasty. So, guys, that's all of the hitting attributes. I hope that helps out with that. Now, let's move on to the pitching attributes, which I think are a lot more confusing. So hopefully we can shed some light on that. All right, so there is a lot to look at when it comes to pitching, but we'll just start with the basic ones that are right here with stamina, home hits per 9, K per 9, walks per 9, home runs per 9, and then so forth. So we'll start with stamina. Extremely obvious. How many pitches your pitcher can throw before he gets gassed and he runs out of energy. Obviously, you don't want to have a pitcher in there that has no energy. That's just going to lead to a lot of missed pitches, and he's going to get absolutely killed. So higher stamina stat, much more important on starters, obviously, and especially when you're playing ranked games. Someone that has a really high stamina, can go a lot longer. So definitely more important in ranked season games. All right, hits per 9 is the shrinking of your opposing batter's inner PCI, making it harder for them to square up a hit. So the exact opposite of what the contact stat does. So it's going to, if you've got a dominant pitcher with an unbelievable hit per 9, it's going to make their PCI smaller. So if they don't have an extremely high-end diamond player that has great contact numbers, it's going to make it even more difficult, and they're going to have to really get a piece of the ball, as it's just not going to be easy for them to get a really good hit with a high hit per 9. Moving on to K per 9, that shrinks your opposing batter's outermost PCI. So that will determine fouling off pitches as opposing to just missing them. So if you have a really high K per 9, it shrinks that outside. And again, that means that they're not going to be able to stay alive as much in at bats because they can't foul a pitch off if they miss it or don't hit it right on the button. So obviously another important stat there. So walks per 9 or BB per 9 affects the pitching interface, making it easier or harder to miss your spot. So it just has an impact with control with whatever actual pitching motion you use, whether it be pure analog, pinpoint. Obviously, pinpoint's the best, but any of those meter as well. A high walks per 9 will help you with that actual interface when pitching. Home run per 9 is not impacted in Diamond Dynasty, so you can ignore that. It does not actually take place or have anything to do in Diamond Dynasty. Pitching clutch is the opposite of the hitter clutch stat, so it will shrink the opposing batter's PCI when there's running in scoring positions or late innings. Again, not a super important stat, but obviously helpful if you are someone who gives up some hits and whatnot, and you're in a lot of those situations. A high pitching clutch will just make it more difficult for the opposing batter to get those really timely hits. Control stats. So this is going to improve the distance from where you're actually trying to land your pitch. So if you have a really high control stat, where you aim it is where it's more likely going to go, as long as you don't mess up your pitching motion. But each pitch, if you look in the top right, has an individual pitch control. So if you have a high 90s pitch control, like Felix Hernandez sinker, essentially it's at 92 and his control is at 90, he can really locate that sinker. If you've got a really low pitch control, like on the sweeping curve at 78, it's going to be a little bit more difficult difficult to actually hit it where you aim it, which obviously makes it much more dangerous, especially on breaking pitches, because if you don't hit your spots and you're trying to pitch in the zone with breaking pitches, those are the ones that get absolutely tattooed. So you got to be careful with that, but don't just look at the pitcher's control stat and assume that all of his pitches are going to be perfect. Obviously, it helps out with the pitches that he has that are, in lower control. But if you right click on the right thumbstick, you can change it and you'll see pitch control as an option, and that will give you a list of his pitches, and they each have a pitch control as well. The velocity stat, pretty self-explanatory, just how fast you actually throw the ball. Really not, nothing crazy there. Break stat. So this is how much movement your pitcher's pitch have. And then obviously each pitch as well has a level of break. So just like control. So again, his sinker has 86 on the pitch break, and he's got a 94 break stat, so that's going to be pretty good. But the four-seam fastball, he doesn't really have any break on that pitch, and it really doesn't move all that much. So again, you just have to keep that in mind. If someone has a four-seam fastball with a ton of break, you could see it move a little bit and actually be, somewhat of a sinker or, a cut fastball, depending on what it is or what arm they throw. But you could see a little bit of movement with that. Obviously, with a four-seamer that doesn't have a lot of break, it's not going to move. So just make sure that, you want to paint the corners with those pitches because they're not really going to move at all. And then it's the same thing for his fielding attributes as with hitters. So obviously these aren't nearly as important. So you can pretty much ignore them. Fielding is just basically the animations that you get. Arm, the arm strength, throwing towards the bases, accuracy and reaction. Really nothing you have to pay attention to there. And the other thing I want to take a look at is, again, so we talked about pitch break and control, but also velocity. So this is important when you're trying to decide between, if you want to use a pitcher in game. Remember, guys, that in my opinion, you want to have a big discrepancy in the slowest pitch and the fast pitch. You really don't want to have three pitches. Like, so we'll take a reliever, for example, that has, three different fastballs and doesn't really have a changeup. Because again, that when you see that come into the game, you want to make sure that you have a pitch in your back pocket that has a pretty big velocity discrepancy. Honestly, Felix Hernandez doesn't really have one outside of the sweeping curve. And I'm not going to lie, every time I've thrown the sweeping curve, if it lands in the zone, it's a home run against. So I really just don't use it. But so his changeup's at 88. It does help, but there's pitchers out there that have phenomenal splits that are absolutely devastating to go up against, because if you're sitting fastball and he throws a changeup and vice versa, it's just extremely difficult. So guys, I hope this helps explain some things in MLB The Show Diamond Dynasty. Again, my videos are more tailored to the beginner players. Let me know what you think in the comments section down below. And don't forget, guys, you can check me out on Twitch live every single day, playing the show starting at 10 a.m. Eastern Time. Link is down below. I'll see you guys next time. Have a good one.